Doomsday is the third horror film by director Neil Marshall, following his two highly acclaimed and creatively bold works, Dog Soldiers and The Descent, both of which earned strong praise from horror enthusiasts and critics alike. Doomsday continues his exploration of genre filmmaking, this time blending sci-fi action with post-apocalyptic horror. The film tells the story of a world devastated by a deadly virus known as the Reaper. Released in 2008, the movie grossed only $22 million worldwide, falling short in terms of commercial success. However, despite its modest box office performance, Doomsday stands out as a compelling and entertaining entry in the action horror genre. For fans of Neil Marshall, the film was a much-anticipated follow-up to his earlier breakout hits. If you've seen the iconic film Mad Max Fury Road, then it's worth noting that 7 years earlier, Doomsday had already captured a glimpse of what this action horror subgenre could look like. While the film is often said to bear the influence of well-known works like 28 Days Later, Mad Max, and Resident Evil, under the direction of Neil Marshall, Doomsday manages to become an entertaining ride in its own right, rather than simply a copycat. The story begins in 2008 in the UK, where Scotland is ravaged by the Reaper virus, a deadly plague that brings scenes of mass death and suffering. In response, the government destroys all routes leading in and out, erecting a massive containment wall stretching from east to west to completely isolate the region. The goal is to prevent the infected from escaping, effectively abandoning them to fend for themselves until death. One of the few survivors of this chaos is a young girl who is rescued during the evacuation. Years later, she grows up to become a top operative in the government's Department of Domestic Security. Her name is Eden Sinclair, played by Rona Mitra, an actress familiar to audiences from films like Hollow Man and Underworld. 27 years later, the deadly virus resurfaces in London, plunging Britain into political and social turmoil. In response, the government devises a plan to locate Dr. Kane, a scientist who was left behind years ago in the quarantined Glasgow zone. Authorities suspect that he may have discovered a cure for the Reaper virus, based on satellite images showing signs of life beyond the containment wall, suggesting that some people may have developed an immunity. At this critical juncture, the government assembles a special task force, led by Eden Sinclair. With the fate of the country at stake, and driven by a faint personal hope of finding her mother, Sinclair embarks on a dangerous mission deep into the Glasgow zone, in search of survivors. From the outset, the film presents a grim depiction of the plague and its impact on society, evoking expectations of zombie-style carnage in the later acts. However, director Neil Marshall subverts those expectations, crafting a story that steers away from a typical zombie outbreak, delivering instead a more grounded and brutal vision of a post-pandemic world. As soon as Sinclair enters the infected zone, she is forced to confront a primitive tribe resembling a savage race. Their appearance is striking: mohawk hairstyles, tattoos, and a cannibalistic culture, visually reminiscent of punk-infused barbarism. This group is led by Soul, played by Craig Conway, who is revealed to be the estranged son of Dr. Kane. Soul broke away from his father to form his own brutal militia within the ruins of Glasgow. After the original outbreak, Britain fractured into three dominant factions. The first is the unified government of England, which still maintains order and normalcy among its surviving citizens. The second, known as the Punk Clan, is a brutal cannibalistic faction equipped with modern technology and facilities. The third group embraces a medieval way of life, complete with castles, knights, and a standing army. This faction is led by Dr. Kane. While the government-controlled areas remain relatively civilized, Scotland has become a quarantined wasteland, cut off from the rest of the country. Within this isolated zone, social order has completely collapsed, and the infected, along with the desperate uninfected, are left to fight one another for survival. Although Soul and Kane are father and son, they have parted ways, each driven by their own survivalist ideology. Both represent opposing threats within the quarantine zone. Saul, tall and gaunt with dark, smeared panda eyes, is portrayed as a power-hungry warlord. Marshall crafts him as a character who sees Sinclair as his ticket back to civilization, pursuing her not just for vengeance but to exploit her as a means of escape and ascension to power. Doomsday delivers wild, brutal violence, including grisly decapitations and disturbing scenes of cannibalism in the following segments. One particularly shocking moment involves Dr. Talbot, a member of Sinclair's squad, who is roasted and eaten raw by a tribe of savage lunatics. Just before this horrifying scene, the audience is treated to a bizarre yet entertaining punk rock stage performance. Director Neil Marshall cleverly incorporates several tracks from the 1980s band Fine Young Cannibals, reinforcing his intent to infuse the film with a nostalgic, retro vibe. It's clear that Doomsday isn't just a dystopian thriller. It's also a love letter to the gritty genre films of the past. Marshall crafts a blood-soaked post-apocalyptic adventure filled with unrelenting danger for the doomed strike team, featuring high-speed car chases, free-fall elevator drops, and packs of flesh-eating dogs. The film opens with a chilling, bleak tone reminiscent of 28 Days Later, then shifts gears into sci-fi action, complete with vehicular mayhem and adrenaline-fueled pursuit. The sound design and action choreography keep viewers on edge, sometimes thrilling, sometimes startling. After narrowly escaping the cannibal horde, Sinclair and the few surviving team members make their way out of the city, aboard a steam-powered train. Traveling with them is Dr. Kane's daughter, who agrees to lead Sinclair to her father, the only hope of finding a cure. The screenplay takes a sharp turn, transporting us back to medieval England, with knights on horseback, swords, and suits of armor. The ruler of this strange kingdom is Marcus Kane, a former medical doctor left behind when the gates to Scotland were sealed. Now in hiding from the world, Kane has become a cruel and reclusive tyrant, hardened by the loss of his wife and the collapse of civilization. Upon discovering Sinclair's return to Scotland, Kane throws her into a gladiator-style death match, meant to entertain his subjects. The setting resembles a medieval arena, and it becomes one of the most memorable battles in Doomsday. It's worth noting that Rona Mitra delivers a cold, stoic, and powerful performance. She trained for 11 weeks to prepare for the role, and it shows. Sinclair is a perfect fit for her. After escaping Kane's fortress, the final act takes us into a thrilling car chase with Soul. By the film's end, Sinclair successfully completes her mission inside the quarantine zone. According to survival logic, those who are still alive in Glasgow are presumed to have natural immunity to the virus. The blood of Kane's daughter is now seen as the key to a potential cure. In the end, Sinclair makes a defining choice. She returns, not just as a soldier, but as a true leader of the wasteland. The final scene carries a familiar tone, reminiscent of Mad Max or Death Race 4. If you're not too concerned with strict logic or groundbreaking originality, Doomsday is a wild and enjoyable ride. Despite the criticism, one might say we owe thanks to Neil Marshall, whose passion for genre filmmaking gives us a film that's both thrilling and nostalgic. From the very beginning, director Neil Marshall never intended Doomsday to be a film for critics or awards. Rather, it was made to satisfy his deep love for classic genre films. Marshall himself admitted, "Doomsday is basically a direct love letter to all the movies I grew up with." The film stands as a tribute to cult classics like The Road Warrior, Mad Max, and Escape from New York. And yet, despite its chaotic energy, we must acknowledge that Marshall approached the project with genuine seriousness and creative ambition. Doomsday is packed with references and visual homages, not as shallow imitation, but as a cinematic collage and artistic celebration of the seventh art. If you're a fan of sci-fi horror, Doomsday is absolutely worth watching. It may not be flawless, but it's a wild, chaotic ride brimming with retro cinematic charm. It's a film that mixes genres, embraces madness, and delivers a Mad Max-style journey that's equal parts brutal, nostalgic, and unforgettable.